Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Workspace panel session here at Define Tomorrow. I'd like to welcome my panel. First of all, we've got Tom Hickling from Microsoft. We've got Simon Townsend from iGel, Spencer Pitts from VMware, and Simon Binder from TrueSec. Welcome, guys. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. First of all, why don't we do it around the room? If maybe you could give yourself an introduction, what it is that you do in your roles, and importantly, what has been your weirdest or best lockdown purchase of 2020 so far. So, Tom, as you're first on my screen, over to you.
Thank you very much. My name's Tom Hickling. I'm what's referred to as a Windows Virtual Desktop Global Black Belt at Microsoft. Now, that does not involve any martial arts or anything like that. It's just really a term to denote a specialization. Now, that specialization obviously is Windows Virtual Desktop. Now, I've been in the end-user computing space for about 25 years or so, all the way back to the days of Metaframe and all that kind of good stuff. And then managed very briefly to get out of the end user computing space when I joined Microsoft. So I became what was referred as a cloud solution architect, so doing Azure all up for a set of customers. But then, as is often the case, it pulls you back in again. So I ended up getting involved with a precursor to WVD, which was Azure Remote App, which then led on to WVD, and hence my role now. The strangest lockdown purchase would probably be a set of rabbits for my kids, which is really annoying because they're destroying the garden, and they don't look after them. So Muggins here ends up looking after them. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Tom. Simon Townsend, over to you.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Simon Townsend. I'm the CMO marketing officer for iGel. Again, I've been in the end user computing space for far too long, coming up to about 20 years or so, deploying things like Citrix, VMware, and that type of thing. I'm responsible for all iGel marketing, so anything from brand awareness, lead generation, and working with both our customers and our partners. My weirdest or top purchase, there's been quite a few, in fact. New microphones, new cameras, but I think probably just the ability to have a stand-up desk has probably been the most useful thing I have done in the last 6 to 9 months or so.
Fantastic. Definitely need to compare notes with you, Simon. I've certainly, my desk has grown and grown and grown out with the amount of kit that I have around me at the moment. So that's good. Simon Binder, over to you.
Thank you very much, Barry. So I work as a workspace or workplace architect at TrueSec, based out of Sweden. Focus primarily on security and compliance, but I do my best to apply that to any workspace or workplace out there. Currently, I'm working with WVD, mobile devices, and a lot of Microsoft Teams to secure them and ensure that they are compliant and also, of course, user-friendly. And in terms of purchases, I would say that my video switchers, I have an Atom Mini Pro video switcher, which have really changed the way I'm able to produce virtual content or video content, has been the best and probably most expensive piece of kit so far.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, the ATEM kit is certainly very good. And I think maybe it's a common theme of us workspace guys. We like our gadgets. So lots of that going on. Spencer, over to you.
Yep, so Spencer Pitts, I'm the Chief Technologist for End User Computing, or the Digital Workspace in VMware. 25 years plus EUC knowledge, I guess. Started off life in a bank and then went to Symantec, and then 13 years ago I joined VMware, covering all things end user computing. And in terms of weirdest purchase, or well, more so I guess best purchase, is I've got a little Lametric. It's like a smart clock, and you can kind of program it, which is really cool for doing things like this. You can get timers up on there and get all your Twitter stuff and notifications. But probably the best purchase was a little £5 sign that just says "Do not disturb," and I can put that on the door, and it's on right now actually. And I could just twist it over so I can stop my 3 children from coming in mid-flow, so to speak. So yeah, that's my best purchase, I would say.
Definitely. I've heard lots of things, people putting huge light bulbs outside their kind of study doors and turning red when they're on, but maybe that doesn't look quite right.
That means something else, yeah, Barry.
I'm not quite sure that one works in every scenario. I think my strangest purchase, I decided to get rid of my relatively new Audi and bought a 15-year-old Nissan 350Z. So I've got a car that's quite a lot of fun now, but I kind of constantly worrying is there going to be any rust? Is it going to break down and things like that? But it seemed a good opportunity without doing the miles to get something a little bit more ridiculous and have a bit of fun. So what I wanted to do first of all is get your opinions on what the term workspace actually means. We seem to keep on relabeling the pillar of technology that we all work for to try and better describe it. Workspace can have many meanings, and certainly I find myself changing it based on who I'm talking to, because people think I'm an office design architect or something like that. I design workspaces. So Simon Townsend, let's go to you first. What's your opinion on what does the term workspace actually mean?
I think in the most simplistic terms, it is really defined by the tools and the setup that a person needs to get access to their corporate apps and data. My workspace might include my phone, it might include my iPad, it might include a MacBook, a Windows PC, a virtual desktop environment. It's that digital workspace that allows me to communicate with you today, allows me to talk to people on Teams, to get work done, send emails, produce content, whatever that might be. And there are numerous different ways, obviously, in which we can deploy that workspace. But I think for me personally, as good as it is that I can get access and consume content on some devices, I do believe that, and call me a little bit old-fashioned, I do believe that the traditional workspace, which is really getting Windows-based or web-based applications out to our users so they can do their job on a device of a certain size with a mouse and a keyboard, is probably the most common and simplest way of thinking about what a user's workspace is.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. And anyone else got any kind of different thoughts or opinions or anything to add to that at all?
Yeah, I would say that when you mentioned office interior design, that's actually one of the ways I introduce myself when I meet my customers, since I see myself as that workplace architect, and IT is within anything today. So my assignments include things like ensuring the right sofa in the right place when we had offices, all the way through to security, compliance, and what Simon is talking about. So if I try to put that into something more understandable, possibly, is that I ensure that all the users have the abilities to use whatever tool they need in the context they are currently in. So regardless if they're working in the office or from home, I ensure that they get the appropriate tools to do the work, regardless of technology, or if it's a sofa or a cell phone or a client.
Fantastic, fantastic. And anyone else got any additions to that?
Yeah, I suppose I think, like Simon said, that the most important piece of this whole discussion is that the end user is being productive. And to be productive, they need to be consuming their apps and their data. That's what enables the business to thrive and to move forward and achieve their goals. I suppose as the vendor of a product in this space, or a number of products in this space, and in particular WVD, what we tend to see is that customers are deploying WVD not for the sake of deploying WVD. It's just a product at the end of the day, but it's what they put on top of that is driving the real value. So what we as Microsoft like to see, and we often say this to customers, is we actually want WVD to be transparent, to fade into the background, and you then can consume your apps and your data, provide the best user experience to your users, to your customers, whoever it might be. So this whole concept of it being one particular thing, I think, is a thing of the past. It's all about how we enable the consumption of those applications and data.
So over to you, Spencer. What do you think? What is your opinion on what workspace means? And kind of bridging into the next question, you're probably the best person that's described the journey that we've been on up until now with the 3 R's. So are you able to kind of give people an understanding of what you've seen this year so far with regards to that transformation?
Yeah, so I mean, the phrase digital workspace, and some of the guys said it earlier as well. So we talked about workspace, and actually, workplace and workspace get kind of interchangeably used. And if I think about what the digital workspace was 4 or 5 years ago, it means something different to what it actually means now. And you heard of the term phygital as well, which is kind of like physical and digital come together. I'm starting to spend a lot of my time speaking to customers around what the new workplace would look like and what a digital workspace will look like as part of that. And this kind of goes back to these 3Rs, which people are wondering what are they? They're kind of the phases I talk to customers around what happened as part of lockdown and the pandemic, unfortunately. So in the first phase, it was what we needed to do to respond, what we needed to do to quickly get people up and running. And we probably did some great stuff. And I saw a lot of IT teams perform miracles, by the way. And we did a lot of stuff with the cloud providers. And we've got some great examples with WVD of scaling up 40,000 desktops in 3 weeks, I think it was, for an American company, an insurance company. But a lot of customers kind of did stuff really quickly and cut corners a bit. And then in the second phase, they sort of looked back, and I called it the reflect phase, and sort of fixed some of the things that they didn't do so nicely in the first phase. And in the third phase, which I think some people are still looking at with half an eye for the future as well, is look, if we do come back to work, the physical workplace, to my point earlier, what does that look like? Is it going to be the same? Our office building is going to look the same, and what does our security need to be? Because we kind of designed the way that we delivered apps, etc., to be sort of from a physical location in an enterprise network. Things are different now. The majority of the workforce, as we speak, we're all working remotely, and we're working from home in that vertical, or we're out on the road, right? If you're a logistics person. So I think the way that we architect stuff is going to change. And a lot of customers are thinking, okay, how do I rethink what we do going forward? So they're the 3Rs.
Definitely. I think we've seen such massive change this year. I think it was Satya Nadella that said we saw 3 years of innovation happen in just 2 months. Tom, obviously WVD coming to full power at the same time, aligning with this, it must have had a massive impact on you, on Microsoft, on WVD. What kind of insight can you give me from your side of the desk with the early stages and the changes that have happened this year?
Yeah, so it has been a tumultuous year. So I suppose what I can say is that when coronavirus did hit, we were just inundated. It was unprecedented. I don't think anybody's ever experienced anything like it. And it really did fall into 2 main areas: Teams to start with. So I think we deployed something like 6 million cores just in response to the Teams demand that was coming through, and most of that demand was coming from the NHS and some other sort of government agencies. So obviously everything was dropped and that was delivered. So it was just a phenomenal amount of work to get those calls into the data centers so that then the NHS could operate on the Teams platform. From our side, we, much like Spencer was saying, we had loads of customers deploying WVD sort of tomorrow kind of thing. So they got on a call with us and said, can we do it? And tomorrow we found out that they were actually deploying it. And then the next day they had users on it. So it was very, very impressive to see that the platform could deliver at scale under such sort of pressurized events that were happening. So I just remember one CEO being on a call, arranged very, very quickly. And he said, we talked about what WVD did. And then he said, can we actually do this? He was not sure that the platform could deliver this, and we said yes, just go and deploy it. And then a few days later we heard that his team had gone and deployed it, and he had 4,000 users up and running in a short period of time. So it wasn't completely and utterly smooth. So there were some problems around capacity in some of our data centers, just because this was completely and utterly unexpected. But what was amazing is the time to get infrastructure deployed into those Azure regions. So within weeks, the amount of infrastructure that had been deployed was just phenomenal. Such that we resolved all of those issues around capacity within 2-3 weeks in many instances.
Definitely. It's such a big change. As you say, we've certainly seen from the team side, and then technologies like VDI, such mass adoption, and people now coming to us to match the 3Rs that you said, Spencer, and wanting to do it properly. They realize they've got something out there initially, but they're realizing they've got to kind of come through and now make this a permanent change. Simon Townsend, I'd be interested to hear what iGel, because iGel is obviously an enabler to home working and an access gateway to some of these technologies that Simon are talking about. So what has iGel seen over the last few months?
There is no doubt about it. We've definitely seen a rise in the amount of VDI and desktop as a service that is being deployed. I think when work from home came about, you could argue there were two types of customer. Those that had some form of desktop virtualization, desktop as a service, and those that didn't. And there's been various horror stories about organizations that needed to enable work from home. They tried to buy 10,000, 50,000, 80,000 laptops, which then needed to be brought into an organization, which then needed to be built and configured before they could then get sent out. The cloud has played a massive part in obviously enabling lots of organizations to do that. There are various different virtualization technologies that are being used for things like NHS track and trace. And those organizations that had some form of VDI, whether it be on-prem or in the cloud, were definitely able to expand out and bring more benefits to those people that needed to work from home. So we've seen a massive uptick in the amount of people that are deploying desktop virtualization, either from on-prem or in the cloud. I've also seen a large number of people now make the move to actually say, do you know what, we've had VDI on-premise for the last 5, 10, 15 years, but with what Microsoft is doing, taking the I out of VDI, taking out some of the complexity, trying to drive the cost down with some of the features that VMware have got in terms of allowing them to scale that up and scale that back down again. We've seen a lot of people now make that move to deploying Windows from the cloud. The question that is then asked and is then brought about is really, well, if I'm going to put Windows in the cloud, what am I going to give my employees as their endpoint of choice? Or coming back to the conversation we had before, what we're going to give them as their local workspace. And that's starting to raise some questions about that third R that Spencer was talking about before, which is, do I need to deploy Windows at the edge if I'm going to invest in putting Windows in the cloud? Because there are still security concerns and management concerns around how we manage all of these edge devices, regardless of whether they're going to be in the office or working from home in the future.
Fantastic. So Simon Binder, I want to come to you in a moment around modern management, because I know you're an MVP for Endpoint Manager and that's been an area. But before, Spencer, to kind of come off Simon Townsend's point there around seeing movement of VDI into the cloud. Obviously, VMware have got Horizon Cloud working very closely with Microsoft. So what is VMware seeing in that VDI traffic, the journey that has been going on during this time?
Yeah, so it's interesting here because actually, if you look at our results as well, we've had a massive increase in VDI. And as Tom said, and we've done a lot of stuff with Microsoft around this as well. And I think the two are very much linked. And I agree, we had a lot of massive upsurge, first of all, in the early days of people that already had Horizon. But some people couldn't buy the kit. So we talked about laptops. You couldn't get hold of them, some people, but you also couldn't get hold of server equipment as well, sometimes as well. And you think about the logistics of getting that there. And they needed it next day. So I think the cloud was a natural option. So we definitely saw a massive uptick with people that were thinking maybe, and some of them had it as a DR solution, but suddenly the DR became production as well. And what I think is quite interesting is I did a slide I am going back and I like my history here, but it's 2007. And it actually had on there, sadly, it said pandemic, massive workforce relocation as one of the primary use cases for virtual desktops. One of them was remote secure working, which even 13 years later, it's still the primary use case. But yeah, we saw a massive uptick in VDI per se. I know we talk about the year of VDI, and I wouldn't quite say it's completely the year of VDI, because I don't think VDI is the sole answer. And I've always said that all the way along. You need the right tool for the right job. And, if you're disconnected with no internet, which isn't too many places these days, but, and you've got another operating system and apps that don't work natively on there, maybe VDI is not the answer for you, right? So, but what I've definitely seen is that it was the quickest and easiest way to get all of those laptops and devices that we were managing in the office and suddenly get everybody up and running productive at home in a secure way. That's the important thing.
Definitely. And I think it's been a constant joke, hasn't it, in our industry, that next year is going to be the year of VDI. And it's obviously started by, it was the year to virtualize your servers, and it was something that everyone did. So then everyone was really grasping at something as to how's this technology going to revolutionize that next thing, and it's going to be the year of VDI. But potentially 2020 is the closest we're going to get to that, but with the mass movement, mass adoption to those workloads. Be interested certainly in your opinions as we come around for questions. But Simon Binder, kind of back to you, and on to Spencer's point there, that VDI is just one option. Having a physical device is the right solution for a lot of people, but even those virtual desktops, we need to be managing those. What have you seen from an insight of a device management standpoint? Fundamentally changing where the people work means we've got to fundamentally change how we're managing them.
Yeah, and I think that's where many organizations have missed the rethink part, because I find, as an example, I've spoken to organizations which felt that, okay, we need thin clients. So let's get Windows-based thin clients out there and keep managing them just if they were fat clients in an office. And that's a certain way of failing, in my opinion. So I think it's about rethinking how we manage those physical devices and adopting that to, like you mentioned, the modern way of managing physical Windows desktops which aren't on a network. And if an organization, for whatever reason, which is in most cases not technical, can't make that change, perhaps they should look into something else. Like, I love Windows, I love physical devices, I have more computers than any normal person needs, but I still find so many use cases for actual thin clients or for mobile devices that enables the same kind of work style as a thin client would do. When it comes to managing virtual desktops, it's the same thing there. We can use the same tools, but in another way, in a different way. And keeping in mind that a virtual machine is very different if it's run on Citrix or VMware, or if it's run in WVD. The way we can provision devices for other vendors than WVD makes us adopt it in one way, and the way we manage WVD hosts makes us adopt it one way, and then you have all the options in between. So I think it's about using the technology but in a different way. And if you can't make that mindset change, perhaps you should try something new.
Definitely. And the tools out there like Endpoint Manager are helping people bridge that gap between the traditional way of managing to a more cloud-centric way. And obviously, Spencer, the same with Workspace ONE, that shifting that management principle out to a more cloud-centric way of working. So, Tom, we'll come back to you now on the question of, if you're talking to a desktop architect today that's managing a fleet of Windows 10 desktop, and largely they're doing it with traditional tools, what would your advice be? Are we going to ditch it all and move to WVD? What is your advice to those people that are trying to make these decisions as to what should the future of their desktops look like?
Yeah, so it's a good, interesting question. To go back to your previous point about, is this the year of VDI? I think that if there ever was a year of VDI, it's actually been in the past, and the future is a different concept. I think the future will be the year or the era of cloud-hosted virtual desktops. So slightly different, similar kind of concept. The cloud has fundamentally changed computing all up, including end user computing. I was at an event a few months back, well, in fact, many months back now, thinking about it, end user computing event, where the CEO said that end user computing was connecting users to Windows machines, which has always been true, will continue in part to be true, but it is missing a major cog now in the overall sort of estate, and that is obviously the cloud platforms that are hosting virtual desktop. So I think the trend and the capabilities and the skilling people need to do are, number one, in the cloud platforms of their choice. So if it's WVD, obviously that platform is going to be Azure, because that brings a whole wealth of extra capabilities that have never before been possible in any kind of virtual desktop service, be that Citrix, VMware, Microsoft service, whatever it might be, when that's been done on premises. So Azure, cloud vendors provide a list of services, as long as you're ARM, that many of those have a benefit on a virtual desktop solution. So things like, auto scaling, I suppose number one, the global footprint that Azure has. So if you went and spoke to an VDI admin 5 years ago and said, do you want to be able to deploy your VMs to your users in 64 regions around the globe? That's never been possible. And the fact that it's all consumption-based pricing, so the ability to just consume and only pay for what you use, and those charges being OPEX rather than CAPEX. So for people that are sort of looking about, what do they need to skill up in, it's number one, the cloud platform, and then the services on that cloud platform that enable virtual desktops. So things like infrastructure as code. This is a new paradigm that's never existed before outside of the cloud. So, we have a service called Azure Resource Manager, ARM templates, but there's other services, Terraform, and there's a whole long list of infrastructure as code products that integrate very nicely with Azure. That is going to be the future of deployment. No longer are people going to be clicking in consoles and sitting there for hours deploying this. Let the platform do that job for you. You just write the infrastructure that you want the platform to go and deploy, and it will go and deploy that. And in conjunction with that is this whole concept of DevOps. So it's obviously the combination of developers and operations, but the VDI has a part to play in that. So new apps coming into the platform, how does that service get rolled out into the cloud so that could be consumed by users? And then certain things to look at inside of Azure, namely, I suppose, things like Azure Image Builder, which is this mechanism for having automated builds of your image. So you just basically tell the service what you want it to build, and it will then go and build it. Now, interestingly, that service is an Azure product, but it uses HashiCorp Packer. So it's the same people that make Terraform. So we've integrated that product inside of Azure Image Builder. That could be combined with a thing called Shared Image Gallery, which then enables the versioning of your images. So you could have multiple versions of it and reference which one you want, and then automates the distribution of that around all of the Azure regions. So if you wanted to go and have your image built in the UK, let's say, and then replicated over to Australia, let the platform do that. Again, nothing that you need to do besides putting a tick in a box. So yeah, I suppose those are the kind of things that VDI admins need to look at, I suppose, to stay relevant as we go forward into this predominantly cloud-hosted era for virtual desktop.
So Simon Townsend, what's your thoughts and opinions on this? If you're talking to someone that's managing largely a traditional infrastructure today, what would your recommendations for movement into the future be?
I think we've just got to change with the times, right? We've spoken about the difference between workspace and workplace. If we were 5 plumbers or 5 builders on this call now, and that was our trade, we're really talking about the tools of our trade, right? We are trying to deploy technology down to users that are the tools of their trade so they can get their job done. When it comes to IT administrators, historically, if you looked at VDI, you would have had to get trained up and skilled up in how to deploy that infrastructure. You probably would have built it. You would have bought a farm of servers, a farm of virtual environment that was on-prem. You would have configured it. You would have deployed it. It would have been sent out to your users. And for a lot of organizations, actually, that deployed VDI 10 years ago, it's probably still up and running, right? It might be on old versions of a Windows operating system. It may well have been upgraded 5 years ago. But the point is there was complexity in deploying it. But once it was deployed, it was actually quite easy to manage and it was quite static. The cloud obviously simplifies and tries to drive the cost of deploying VDI down. So if you look at desktop as a service, look at Horizon Cloud WVD, it's now significantly easier to deploy a virtual desktop than it was, say, 10 years ago. And arguably, some would argue it can be more cost effective. The challenge that the cloud brings, however, is that the rate of change is far quicker than before. So unlike 10 years ago, where we left things alone for the next 5 years and we didn't have to touch it, the problem is the cloud is constantly updating. VMware, Microsoft, all of them, everybody's constantly innovating and changing and adding new features and functionality. And I think it's really the IT admin's job to try and help automate that process and ensure that those changes are not affecting end user experience, they're not affecting end user productivity. So I actually see the role of an administrator that was deploying desktops in the past has now got to worry about, how do I measure, how do I monitor, how do I automate and keep my workspace delivered in the most optimized fashion. And I see automation, I think, plays a big part of that. DevOps, as we've already spoken about, any monitoring tools at the moment seem to be very, very popular and very, very key as well. And obviously ensuring the security all the way from the endpoint, which as we know might be at the edge, all the way up to where our data is.
Definitely. So Spencer, the same to you now, and I certainly know from our discussions in the past that user experience is something that is very important to VMware, and you maybe you're looking at it in some different ways as well. So what would your advice be to those desktop architects planning for the future? We've already heard about looking at the cloud, automating. What would your advice to them be?
So we haven't touched on apps. I mean, ultimately, VDI there is a vehicle, a conduit, if you want, for delivering apps of some description. So, at some point, we need to think about the apps that we use. And what I also see here is we've been talking about the emergence of SaaS apps. So you talked about cloud in terms of the infrastructure layer and how we can, automate and orchestrate that really easily. But a lot of people are going to get to that point, but as most of their apps will be sitting outside their data center. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting there, and it goes back to pretty much everything that we said, is, well, if we're not now getting all of our stuff from the data center and it's mostly coming from the cloud, why are we kind of still going into the data center from a network perspective and then coming back out? So I think there's an opportunity here to look at the whole security space and think about our networking and, take the opportunity to redesign. If you had a blank bit of paper right now, would you say, let's put a load of stuff in the data center and have all our network traffic go through there with all our security tools only to come back out? You wouldn't, would you? You'd kind of put something in the middle and sort of make it kind of work out where it needs to go automatically. And you probably heard recently as well that the industry is all over something called SASE, a Secure Access Service Edge. And I mean, the main, forget the intricacies because everybody's going to be jumping on that bandwagon, I would say, from all vendors, right? So let's be honest there. But, take a step back. The concept's quite interesting, is you need to think about users won't necessarily always be in the office in the same way they were. So we need to think about how we do that security, connect them, and the devices and the VDI or physical devices, everything we've spoken about, that's going to change based on those people and where they are. But the one thing is you can't guarantee they're all going to be in the office in the same way. I think that's the point here. So we need to be a bit more flexible about our apps and the networking and how we kind of allow people to work wherever it is. And I think that's a big difference between the old digital workspace we used to talk about.
Definitely. I think flexibility, I think applications being aligned to the business and delivering a better productivity experience to the users has got to be our number one. Simon Binder, so same question to you. What's your thoughts and opinions that you'd be giving to the architects of the future based upon what we've heard so far?
I think that both Simon and Spencer is on the right track. Like, when I go out to customers that are managing, like I said, managing their physical devices the way they've always done it, regardless of where they are today, and I tell them that, okay, first and foremost, you shouldn't be doing that. Second, I tell them that your VPN connections are insecure. And then they jump and, what VPN? It's super secure. Everything terminates within ourselves or our data centers. How can that be insecure? But that's in practice is something we advise against from a security point of view. Rather do what the rest of the panel says. Focus on what's important, the identities, the data, the apps, and ensure that you can secure them wherever they are. And that also requires you to think in new ways. And I think that what we shouldn't forget, what we shouldn't rethink in a couple of years and say, okay, we should have done it a different way, is to have that security aspect together with the user experience top of mind from the start. The users doesn't care about security when it comes to technology. They want to feel secure, but they don't want to notice that. So what I tend to do is look at what virtualized desktop gives us, look at what data protection on a file level gives them, and just market it in another way. Say that, okay, we want to classify and protect our data. We want to ensure that you reach some kind of agreement with our security posture prior to accessing it. But look at what that enables you to do. It enables you to share data in a secure way. It enables you to work securely regardless of where you are. Don't focus on security. build that in and only tell the users what they absolutely need to know and package it in a way that they want to be given it. Seamless, and where they can feel, okay, I'm secure by default because some admin over here has taken care of that. So I just need to do my job in the best possible way in the situation we're in.
Definitely. I think it's a really interesting time. And Simon, as you've touched on a number of times, it's about thinking about this in a new way, thinking about it a different place. I think often we can kind of get to the how or the what of the conversation and not start with why, which the great Simon Sinek book kind of thing. Why are we actually doing this? What are we trying to achieve? So a bit of a quick fire round now as we bring this to the end. And I did think twice about putting this question in, especially Tom representing WVD. I want to bring into question the role that Windows has to play in our longer-term future of the workspace. So I'll save the Microsoft representative to last. But so Simon Townsend, what role does Windows play, and what other way could we deliver those experiences to our users?
Yeah. So first of all, Spencer mentioned it's all about the apps, right? Predominantly, we've used a Windows desktop because we've got Windows-based applications. And as long as Windows applications are around, give or take a few technologies that we may be able to use, but as long as Windows applications are around, you pretty much need a Windows desktop to deliver them. The question is how quickly are those Windows apps dropping? You know, how long is that tail? And I think what you will find is that tail is now starting to drop. To Spencer's point, there are more and more applications that are based in the cloud, more and more SaaS applications. You've only got to take a look at Office 365. You've only got to take a look at things like Salesforce, for instance. People are moving over. But as long as there are Windows applications, we're going to need a Windows operating system to deliver them. The question is do you need to deliver that from the cloud, that desktop, to host those applications, or do you need to deliver it locally? The other thing I would say is that regardless of the application, you still need an operating system of sort for a device. And the question really is how big and feature rich does that operating system need to be in the future? I'm obviously biased. I work for iGel. We've got a very small Linux-based operating system. But if you take a look at what Microsoft is doing, if you take a look at what Apple have done, if you take a look at what Android does, the operating system itself and its layer that it provides between applications and the hardware, I think that is going to end up being significantly smaller and significantly easier to manage in the future. So we're always going to need an OS, but is it the Windows desktop that we've known for the last 15, 20 years?
Definitely. Spencer, over to you. Same question.
Yeah, so look, the industry's littered with things that we wanted to get rid of over time. Not that I'm saying we want to get rid of Windows, by the way, but I remember working with a mainframe that still, back in the day, lots of customers still have those mainframes. We're going to have a raft of all different types of technologies, different operating systems. To Simon's point, though, it will be about the apps. And if you think about Windows, and when I first, because I used to use OS2 Warp as well, back in the day, a long time ago. And then one of the beauties of Windows was when you layer apps onto them, they kind of can talk to each other. And the interoperability side of things. And I think sometimes we forget that because we're all very much, I've got a phone, and on the phone we can download these apps, and they're all containerized by default by the operating system. But actually, if you think about why Windows was so successful earlier on, it's because all the apps could work, object-based and links and embedding and all the things that you could copy and paste between them. There's some really good stuff. And actually on a phone, it's not used like that. And I do see this whole thing where people go, everything's going to be like a phone going forward. I don't think it is. But more important is a phone's very useful for a particular use type, right? And so the Windows desktop is particularly useful for a type of person. If you think about it, Windows was very much aligned to people that used to do office productivity stuff in an office, hence the name, right? We look at technology and we look at every single person in the workforce. Everybody needs a different tool according to what they need to use, right? So I think the question will be, what's the role of, say, Windows in the office use case? Because it's going to be different for somebody else that's on the front line who needs a different application or does a different job in a nuclear missile submarine. I always use as my kind of extreme example there. But Windows is going to be with us for a long time. It's probably going to change to a degree. Containerization, I think, is going to become more and more of a thing. because although you like things talking to each other, we don't want tentacles going everywhere, and that's what makes Windows, or has been traditionally, hard to manage. Hence all the things like app volumes, FS logics, and we haven't even talked about stateless desktops yet. We haven't got into that scenario, but it's going to be there for a while, but it won't be the only thing. That's the point. Being able to look after all of them and not keep your tool sets for managing them, I guess, and have that, I think everybody's mentioned it here, have this way of being able to manage all your device types and all the operating system types in a consistent way. I think it's going to be important. And you don't care what the operating system is to a degree, and you cannot obfuscate or get rid of that complexity away from the end user. The end user doesn't really care how they get access and what's in the middle. They just want to get their job done ultimately.
Definitely. Simon Binder, same question over to you.
Yeah, and like I said, I absolutely love Windows. I've been managing Windows for a decade now, and I find it to be the best or the most suitable operating system for me. Having that in mind, I do see, like Townsend mentioned, that we will have it will decline. It have already started to do that. I see so many organizations that are adopting other operating systems because that's what their users need, wants, or requires. So I try to twist that question around a bit and say, okay, what else if not Windows? And that's why I find the release of Microsoft Edge on Linux to be such an important step towards a new future. Because I strongly believe that in a couple of years' time, we won't be talking about Windows, how much I love it and how many apps still runs on it. Because the only thing the users will see is, in my opinion, either Microsoft Edge or Microsoft Teams. Because that's where we consume our data, that's where we collaborate, and that's where we can get access to whatever virtual desktop we have running in the cloud. So I see that we will be running Windows for many, many years to come. How we run it, that will definitely vary, but I feel that the future lies within other things like the browser or within collaboration tools.
Fantastic, some good points there. And Tom, to come to you, what's obviously being a Microsoft employee, you probably need to tread carefully. But what are your views, opinion, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so let me try not to be too biased. But I think Simon hit the nail on the head. It is all about apps at the end of the day. And there's lots of Windows apps out there, and I don't think that's going to change significantly. I think it's correct, it's going down, but it's not going to disappear, and there will still be massive amounts of them out there. So there will still need to be a Windows OS. What I can say from the Microsoft side is a few things. Microsoft is ever changing, so Windows will never ever stay exactly the same. And it's no longer, Microsoft is not driven by Windows or Office anymore. It's Azure, number one, followed by Office 365. You could argue that it's the other way around potentially. So what are we seeing in that space then? So I think the first thing is WVD. As part of WVD, there's a flavor, let's say, or a feature called Windows 10 multi-session. This is the capability of having multiple users logged onto the same Windows 10 VM. Never at all been possible before. Now that is a feature of WVD. It is not a SKU of Windows that you can go and buy, download. It's a component of another service running from Azure. And I think that perhaps influences the direction of Windows, that it's being moved towards being an operating system that's hosted on a hyperscale platform. Now, ironically, it's worth noting that there are more Linux VMs that run on our IaaS platform than there are Windows. So I think that kind of also shows the direction that Microsoft is going, that it's not just Windows anymore, it's an operating system or operating systems of choice to enable you to run the applications that then enable your business to be successful. But then specifically looking in Windows, I think, and again, it always comes back to the applications. We've got this new service called App Attach, which is a feature of WVD, which combines MSIX applications with this capability of mounting them to VMs. Now that's, again, been built into the Windows code. So there's no need for any agents or anything. And again, all that is just to enable our customers to provision, present, distribute software to those VMs to enable the end users to consume that. And again, so I just think that shows that the value that Windows still provides, but the updates that we as Microsoft are putting into it to enable it to run from the cloud and to support new methods of getting applications to end users.
Definitely, and I think it's quite interesting, and I agree with all of you. I think we're focusing on securing and making available the data and the applications. I love this idea that Windows is now available as a service from the cloud, and that can support the workloads that still require that Windows operating system, whilst allowing the users the flexibility and the freedom to pick up any device that they want to be able to work in a secure manner without IT going, oh, hold on a minute, that isn't in our management platform. You can't use that because it's not in our management platform. So it allows that abstraction to drive that real user experience. And I completely agree. Windows has got a long and bright future ahead, but I think it's going to be changing. And I think seeing some of the great devices that you see Microsoft execs handling in every single keynote presentation I've seen, they're running Android on them. So no longer does Microsoft equals Windows. Microsoft loves Linux. Microsoft loves Android. It's a really interesting and bright future. So thank you ever so much, everyone, for joining me. What I will ask you to do is one last round. Where can people find you? Where can they follow you on social media and Twitter and things like that? So Tom Hickling.
Yeah, so just at Tom Hickling on Twitter, and then just search for me on LinkedIn. I also have a little blog site at tomhickling.com where it's, as you would imagine, predominantly WVD related. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
Brilliant, thank you. Simon Townsend.
Simon_Townsend on Twitter.
Fantastic. Spencer Pitts.
Yep, me on LinkedIn and at Spoinster on Twitter.
Fantastic. And finally, Simon Binder.
At Binder Tech on Twitter, and you can also search for Knee Deep in Tech, which is our podcast and blog.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much all for joining. I've really enjoyed the conversation. As ever, when we meet up as a workspace community, it's always rich and full and such a good conversation. Thank you to everyone that's watching this. We've got loads of great content for the rest of the day. So look through the agenda and pick the sessions that mean to you. Thank you ever so much for watching.